Okay, so welcome to part 2, everybody. So in this, what you're going to do is you're going to be using value to create different textures. So this time, the first exercise was using value in different ways, creating value in different ways, to emulate a three-dimensional object and light. This time you're going to be doing it to create different textures. And so what I want you to do is I want you to choose a shape to draw three-dimensionally. A cylinder is probably the easiest, like I have here in this image. So I would suggest doing a cylinder, but if you would like to do a cone or a box or something like that, you certainly can. And what you're going to do is you're going to draw. Let's see, I need to get my layers straightened out here. What you're going to do is you're going to draw 9 different shapes. So just 9, not all these. 9 different shapes with different textures that you find around, your house. So you could look at the texture of your couch. You could look at the texture of your clothing. You could look outside on rocks and trees. You could look at leaves. You could look at your washcloth in the kitchen or fur if you're really brave. We are going to do fur later on the term, but we're not ready for that. That's a big one. So, but you can try it. Anyways, so what you're going to do is, you start out by drawing your base shape with contours, like so. And then let's say you want to go for rocks. Well, how do you even approach that? Well, you want to start out, if we look at this rock texture over here, you can see that it kind of starts out with mapping where does space go back the farthest. So you want to look at the texture that you're trying to draw and look at where space is going back the farthest, and that's oftentimes a great place to start. So now this cylinder isn't really going to have this here because there isn't a straight line on a rock texture like that. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that for now. It just sort of depends on the texture that you're doing, like how that's going to work. But anyways, so I'm going to go through here and I'm just looking at this rock texture example that I have. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to push different contours. Not contours, I apologize. I'm just mapping out cracks in the rock texture where those cracks might be. So I'm just going to start out with that. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to go back in and I'm going to use value to suggest a particular texture. And of course I have to break my contour line because I have physical rocks coming off of the side and wrapping around to the back as well. All right, so I'm just going to do this little area here because otherwise this tutorial and demo would be really, really, really long and we don't want that. So let me go ahead and let me just make the top a little bit more rocky here. There we go. Okay, and then I'm just going to go back in and erase some of this that I have. So then what you want to do is you want to, just like we did with the bottle, you want to look at the surface and kind of map out, how is the light behaving and how does the way that light is behaving create dimensionality? And how do we use texture to replicate that in our drawing? So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to start playing around. And this doesn't need to be calculated or even, very, it doesn't need to be rendered exactly, It's just, this is you learning and getting familiar with how texture can create light. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and rework these initial lines that I dropped. And I'm going to make the areas that are the farthest back in between the cracks of the rock go back farther. And I'm going to kind of fill in some of these gaps. So you see how slowly that's making them feel a little bit more realistic, like they're 3D objects, because they're having a varied amount of thickness in the lines that are showing where the cracks of the rock is. So I'm going to go in and work some of these in. And so if I made these all the same thickness, it wouldn't feel like there's any dimension to them at all, you know? So I want to make sure that I'm variation and variety, especially when you're using texture, that's kind of what makes things realistic. So then I'm going to come in and I'm going to just cast some shadows throughout. Now, if we go back to our rock texture, well, what makes the rocks kind of look and feel pointy? Well, it's actually the light areas that do that. And we can look at like this example here too. And that one's a little bit more geometric. It has more hard edges to it. But anyways, I'm going to just go in and start playing around with value. This isn't going to be realistic light in the sense that it's exact, but I am going to start emulating, the texture of rocks and start tricking you, the viewer, into thinking that that is indeed what it is that you're looking at. And if you look at this drawing, what it is, it's a variation of light throughout. So let's see, I'm going to go in by adding some shading first, and then I'm going to go in and add some texture after that. So one thing I kind of do is I kind of start from these areas where I've got the thickest cracks, and I kind of just bring some value in from there. And for this exercise, I would suggest that you use a mixture of your dark leaded, use a mixture of H and B's, your pencil, and your pencil box. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go in and add some varied light values, just kind of over the rocks. And it'll be pretty random, but it'll eventually come together to kind of start to seem like it's convincing you that these are real rocks. So. There's Max. He wants to get in on this. He can't draw yet. When I give him a marker, he just kind of puts it in his nose or his mouth. He's frustrated. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So now is where I'm going to come in and use hatching to create more texture. Maybe I'll even get crazy and do some cross hatching. So okay, so what we have here is a great start to some pretty decent looking rocks, I think. And it's one of those things, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, when you're looking at a painting and it's very expressive and the mark making seems very fast, but it looks pretty realistic. And you think to yourself, well, how do they do that? Well, part of it is just your mind playing tricks on you and the way that our brain likes to perceive things and make sense of it as though it is realistic. So there's that, that's helpful for artists, but also, things don't have, it's one of those things where it looks like water and then you walk up to it and you realize it's just a bunch of brush strokes that look pretty random after all. So when we're zoomed into this, it doesn't really look like it has too much dimension to it. I mean, it does, but it doesn't, right? But when we back up, let's say we're backing away from the work, well, then it looks really three-dimensional. So that's always just a component, and it just takes practice and time. And but yeah, that's why things don't need to be rendered out completely. It's still very much suggesting the texture of rocks. So anyways, I want you to do 9 shapes. You can do this all on one page as we have been doing, in the past. So let me just shut the visibility off there of these layers. So you can just, get, it's a hidden layer. Get your piece of paper and just break it out into 9, okay? We are going to get into some full drawings, but I want to make sure you have a skill set and texture and value and using that to create three-dimensionality and light sources to a degree. You'll still get better at it over time, obviously, but at least you'll have a base. So we'll probably get into some landscape drawings, some outdoor drawings next week. Of course, given that we can go. Maybe some indoor-outdoor. I don't know. Anyways, so you've got the bottle drawings, 4 of those, and then you need to do 9 shapes doing your best to draw a different type of texture on each one of those, okay? All right, well, that's it for this week. I hope you all are doing great out there, and let me know if you have any questions, if there's something I missed or didn't cover, okay? All right, bye.